and people change, and I'm yeah, I'm technically out of it. I could put shoes on your mule, but I don't know if I could turn on the phone.
Well, thanks for joining us, Michael. This is going to be great. I want to give a big shout out to Ronnie Pontiac, first of all, who suggested that we connect, and yeah, this will be interesting. Do you want to give us a bit of a like sort of an overview of who you are and stuff, and how you kind of came to where you are right now? We can keep it kind of quick and short
Yeah.
because there's lots of stuff to get into, but
But the general thing is, I'm maybe last man standing or very close to it. I'm one of the very few people who actually had presidential permission to live with uncontacted tribes. And so I had the opportunity to not only live in those cultures for very extended periods of time, but I got to take part in ceremonies and all that were completely unaffected by the outside world. The people, many of the people I were with weren't even sure the people who were coming in were human. Many times I thought they were actually big maggots, right? That came in on a helicopter, which was a dragonfly that laid the maggots, right? So because of that, I have a very different understanding of psychotropic plants and drugs and the cultures of the people. And my two basic areas are the Amazon basin, and I still do have a ranch in Oaxaca, Mexico, where in the area where the mushroom religion, the only place in the world it really survived in any form. So that's kind of my background. I started out unlegal age in the Mazateca, and as I got older, I ended up in the Amazon. That's where I learned how to survive in the rainforest.
wow. And there's actually a surviving mushroom religion.
Well, yes, many people know about Maria Sabina and Julieta, and they live in Huautla, which is kind of the city almost of the Mazateca. Back in the day, it was 12, 14 hours for me to get to Huautla. And in Huautla, people say a lot that, oh, no, nobody knows. That's why we're making it up, because nobody knows the religion. Yes, in Huautla, it's been turned into Catholicism since the French came with Napoleon II. But in the old country, back where I was, when I was young, it was very much intact still, the pre-Columbian beef system. And it's not the mushroom that's being heralded here in the United States. It's a completely different mushroom from the ones that are documented here. And the common name for it there is dishito.
Is it still psilocybin?
No, it is not a psilocybin mushroom, though there is some debate because the people who have pushed that agenda like to claim it, but they've never seen these mushrooms. They have no idea of them. I am still the only outsider that was ever allowed in the forest there to pick the mushrooms and be part of the ceremonies. And the people there are very aggressive. That's why probably the mushroom picked them, because any outsiders that would come in the area and push themselves, they kill.
Wow. What's the difference between the psilocybin and that kind of mushroom?
In a general sense, the psilocybin mushroom, that's why we have the what do you call it, the self-improvement, self-work movement. It's about you, the history. Like I hear people speak, supposedly have knowledge, and say, well, it's all starts in our mind. It's all about us. It's what our mind's amazing, and it uses these chemical compounds. But they love to say that because by saying that removes the indigenous people. And if they didn't keep this knowledge alive for thousands of years, me or no one else would know about it. But you make it into chemicals and they don't count anymore.
And
so
it takes away the spiritual. Takes away the spiritual aspect, it seems too.
Exactly. And so these things, you have actual visions. You see actual, I could see you sitting there, Graham, as you're sitting there. It's not this fluttery, bubbly, blah, blah, blah. That's psilocybin, and it's great, but this is something different. Yeah. It's an actual vision versus a hallucination or some.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that. I interrupted you. I do want to record the video just in case.
Yeah, that's fine.
So
Graham's the straight man here.
just in case. So, I mean, does it open up? Do you think that opens up doors? Does it give you sort of a like a sense into, you can see through dimensions and see different things, like different aspects of reality that you just can't normally see? Do you think?
I could put it more exact than that. For me, the psychedelic movement has been frozen in, and you see it in the art. Since the 60s, it's been that colors dripping, geometric forms melting, morphing into each other. That's what the true talking plants use to keep the uninitiated away.
Wow.
That's the carnival of colors. You have to go past that. And if you go into that world past that, it's an actual realm that an interesting factor of it that happened with me with the Mazatec people and why they let me in is there's road signs, there's things in that world. And unless you were there, you wouldn't know them. And everybody, if you went there and I went there 10 years apart, we'd both know the same road signs. It's a place. And we, in general, we haven't gotten past that. Now the people more or less trying to control psychedelic want us to stay there, because to do that, you can make it into a commodity, something you can sell and make money at truly a journey into the soul and beyond the soul into, I would say, the world of the dead, the world of plants.
Wow.
Hard to sell.
So, I mean, we're kind of caught in a bit of a conundrum here, because in some ways it's good that it's becoming sort of legalized and people are accepting it as a therapy, as a real sort of help for people. But on the other hand, we, like you said, we don't want it controlled and commoditized, and you're almost limiting the potential, I think, as well.
Very much. And that's the thing I'm very afraid of, because people don't realize the psychedelic movement was sold as starting in the 60s in the United States. I'm in my 70s. I was part of that time. No, it actually started in the 20s in Germany. They had synthesized mescaline, I believe, in 1897. And they had discovered it in 1897. And in 1919, they had synthesized it. So by 1920, Hermann Hesse, many of the founders of the Nazi Party, Guido von Liest, Karl Haschhofer, Dietrich Ehrhardt, they were all taking lots of psychedelics then. And there was a lot of new age, there was a lot of new belief system. People were losing our time in history. So they were going to modern times very quickly with the airplane and this. So there was a movement to go back to the past. And that's why they went to King Tut's tomb and Machu Picchu. We were trying to pick up the pieces before they were gone. And as that evolved in a very awakening movement, it turned into fascism and Nazism. And I believe what they're trying to do is exactly what Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley, the lead biologist in England at the time, I was very close friends, and I'm in his book before he died, Francis Huxley. So I heard these stories right from the horse's mouth. And there's a 1937 film with the Huxleys saying, we must give major doses in these refined psychedelics to only Anglo elite academics and financial people. And the other people should be more or less microdosed and to be happy idiots being their slaves, basically. And that's more or less what I see they're trying to sell now. So I'm fearful of it. Yes.
Wow.
And for me, the big point is this, is we are so removed from nature right now that nature's not in trouble, but the human niche is in terrible trouble and all the other animals in it. And these plants done correctly with the true rituals, not made up rituals, the real thing that's been tested for thousands of years and all, can build that bridge of communication, which we desperately need. And unless we have people who can do that and use those plants, we will not connect with nature. And all these other uses of psychedelics will have no meaning because we'll all be dead.
I don't know how to ask this question because it's a bit vague in my mind, but you really, I mean, I was just listening to a show that wasn't about this in general, but it really wrapped up like UFOs and the psychedelics and the Nazis and Project, obviously Paperclip and MK Ultra too, like bringing over, like there wasn't just the Nazis, there was the American government was also using psychedelics and some mind control experiments way back, like before.
I'm very familiar with that.
Sort of people realized it. And so how much did, I don't even know where the question is in there, but I feel like it has something to do with the way we're treated in this modern society now, because it opened up doors. I think they learned so much about it that they realized that, wow, these humans actually have powers that they don't want us to realize how much power we have spiritually, psychedelically. And they just sort of, started sort of the fear porn propaganda. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I feel like maybe that's why the 60s, that's why they sort of recreated the whole psychedelic movement. I don't know.
Well, two points. What a funny point. I've spoken with the people from Johns Hopkins who are doing the research, some of them, and they love to say, Timothy Lear and those people, they let the genie out of the bottle. But now with us, and we have real psychonauts, we're keeping the genie in the bottle. And I got to laugh. Haven't you ever heard of Malapalooza and Genie in the Bottle and Burning Man? People are doing 50 different psychedelics and drugs a day. The genie is so far out of the bottle. It's just a silly rap. On the other side, what you were getting at first is in the 1930s, it is a fact. They know the name of the two Nazis that were in Huautla collecting information. It was a man named Rico and a man named Weislanda. And they were very much part of the Nazi thing to go around the world and collect all this mystical information. The United States government got very scared about that. And they originally sent the wonderful Richard Evans Schultes from Harvard over there to see. And he did not get along with them very well. But when they got there in the mid-30s, there was already an evangelical preacher there, Eunice Pike, who was there, who believed that that these mushrooms were literally the penis of the devil, and they were going to be used. So believe it or not, this wild story you started with actually historically took place. There was this real battle in Huautla for who was going to gain the knowledge. The amazing part was the true mushroom and the native people there never gave up anything. So these people went like we're doing now and said, well, we can invent everything. And if we sound convincing, it'll become the truth. But that's an illusion and a hallucination in itself. Just because you believe it and say it like you believe it does not make it true.
So how does the talking plants fit into this? Like, what do they think about their substances being used and synthesized into something to change the behavior of humans and not a natural way? Do you know what I mean? Like it.
Yes. The plants themselves, and because they're talking plants, it's one of the things I explain to people. You get a lot of people now say, oh, I'm a shaman or I'm a this. Well, going to a ayahuasca camp in Peru and reading a couple books and getting stoned a lot does not make you have no idea what a real medicine person is in the tribe. It's a completely different animal than that. And the plants very much are aware, but you got to remember, they're not humans, so they don't relate in linear time. Plus, the key why there's been so much misunderstanding is it took me 37 years to learn the language of Dishitu. It took me 18 years to learn the language of ayahuasca. These plants have their language, and if you don't know their tonalism and their way, you're not communicating. You're just running around in your own head. Once you learn their language, they will speak to you very directly about things they have told me many things. There is no way I could have known them in my perimeters. And 30 years later, they came out to the name of the person in the place, exactly like they were told me. And what they're part of, why, as in the theory with the Nazis and all, that there's been this agenda going on for a long time to control it. Well, the native people have had their thing too, and so have the plants. And that's why the ghost dance came into being, because in the ghost dance original ritual, it's right in the codices, they show it, that Dishito was born from the semen of the plumed serpent Quetzalcoatl when he evolved in the underworld from the young god Huautla and became the plumed serpent. So it's very much, and the ghost dance was a ritual that was the beginning of civilization. It was about corn and creating civilization. But from that point on, they knew back then, and it's written, people say, well, where do you get this? You make this up like us? No, I read codexes, I read hieroglyphics, and it's right there. I read them with H.B. Nicholson, the Grand Master of them. It's right there. They just don't know how to read them, and they never lived with these people. That's what's kind of created me. I can read hieroglyphics. I've lived for an insane amount of time with uncontacted naked tribes. So I wouldn't say I was in the Stone Age, even though they had no metal tools when I was there. But it was really the thing. So I understood how the rituals were before they were bastardized. And between knowing that and talking with the plants and reading hieroglyphics, I was able to put together the pieces of the story that I talk about.
Is it the steps of the ghost dance?
It is the steps of the ghost dance. You jumped me there, Graham. That's exactly it. It's the steps of the ghost dance. Because the big misconception that people make with the ghost dance, which I've gone through some conflict recently, because most historians believe the ghost dance was a dance that came up with the peyote through Tequibo to his son Huautla, and it never existed until a failed childish revival movement in the late 1800s, early 1880s, 1890 when it ended. But actually, there's a great deal of proof, which I can document, that takes the ritual way back to pre-Columbian times. It wasn't a silly made-up thing. That's what I call it enlightenment. The belief that the more you act white, the more knowledge you have. Yeah. It's not reality. These rituals went back a real long time, and they are part of an ancient lineage. And right in the codexes, in the Codex Borgia and in the Codex Mixtecas, they point out clearly that we're in the fifth world now, which will be the world that can possibly be destroyed by human beings themselves. And the ritual is actually created to ready all those hidden people for the events taking place now. We're in their own way, and myself included, are really fighting for humanity's niche in nature, because I believe it's in peril, and they all believe it's in peril. And I've learned this from the plants.
Wow. When this so-called revival happened in the late 1800s, did it get squashed with other sort of Native American rituals? And I know in Canada they had some banning on like potlatches and certain spiritual practices. Yeah. Was it similar to that in America?
No, far worse. Sitting Bull at the time, who was a true medicine man, the Papa Sitting Bull, he was the most famous celebrity in the world at the time through Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. And Sitting Bull said that I'm a member of the Lakota Ghost Lodge, and I believe in the spirits and all, but I don't believe some white man's circle dance is going to bring back our dead relatives rising up through the earth. And what happened, why the ritual did not work, was it was so bastardized and changed. The Shakers had been with the Paiute for a few years by the time, and all that falling on the ground and shaking and all, that's the Shaker religion. That's not it. It was a Shaker round dance. So by the time it got to those people, even Wovoka claimed he was the native Jesus Christ, right? It was very much embedded in it. And what happened was, when it got to the Lakota were trying to make a revival because they were in the worst shape. They were all dying of diseases and locked up in pig pens and the worst. So they rallied their thing. And a woman who's the wife of the mission officer, excuse me, the reservation officer, who was in control of the food and was stealing all the food for the Indians, everything. Just Har McLaughlin, his name was. Not him, but his wife invented this whole thing that it was a ritual about the men getting sexually crazy and wanting to rape white women. Well, at that time in history, and I know old people from, when I was a kid, I know people who fought at the Little Bighorn. Believe it or not, they were still alive at that time. And they looked as white women as kind of dead fish. They weren't excited by them. It wasn't their people. So that was just made up. And they sent specifically the 7th Cavalry in, which was Custer's cavalry, to go and murder the Sitting Bull. They murdered him. They made it illegal to ghost dance. And then that maybe 5-6 days, a week before Christmas, his cousin, Bigfoot, was coming in from the Badlands, and they wanted to ghost dance where Crazy Horse's heart was buried at the Wounded Knee, and the military encircled him and murdered all the women and children and everything. And that was the end of it. Wovoka continued to live because Wovoka was adopted by a white rancher, and he spoke fluent English, could read English, had a life and all. But that was the end of the ghost dance. And Mooney, James Mooney from the Smithsonian, saw it as a dying people's ignorant attempt to bring back a lost culture. But my point is, he was ignorant because he didn't know these people, that it was a long lineage, this dance. It is actually documented that the first time the ghost dance was danced on U.S. soil in the United States was in 1680 by Popeye in the Pueblo Revolt. And how I realized the dance had gone all through the Americas was when in the 80s, when I was fighting an epidemic among the Yanomami in the Alto Orinoco, a woman died on a beach. She collapsed, and there were so many people dying around us that the wonderful doctors I had with me, I was the head scout for it. They were like, Miguel, you can't keep going. We're going to lose kids. We got to go. 2 hours later, she stood up and started dancing and singing. And when she stood up, she washed herself in soil, just like Leonard and Henry Crow Dog did. And it was the Crow Dogs who brought the ghost dance to the Lakota. I knew the Crow Dogs very well. And then I know their ghost dance song. And she started singing in Yanomami, Yapuiwe Sharika Teri, bring back our arrows to us. Now, when the United States government heard the Lakota sing those exact words, they said, aha, it's a violent revolt. Well, the Lakota weren't stupid. They weren't gonna go up against Gatling guns with bows and arrows. They knew that. In their culture, give us back a sharika, give us back our arrow, means give us back our manhood, give us back our man. Because in indigenous culture, all elements of nature either have a feminine quality or a masculine quality, including the talking plants.
Darren, do you have anything you want to ask or add?
Good thing. First thing was, and I got a lot of trouble for this at one point, because my technique I invented was I would go to the closest town near the region I was going, and I would go to the bordello, and I'd ask the madam there, do you have any girl from the Hunyakwi, the Piaroa, whatever tribe it was? And they always did. And I'd say, I'm cool and all. I just want to talk with her. I want to learn. And so I would do this. Some people saw that as not such a good way, but that's what I did. And basically what I learned was the key to my thing was probably the real biggest difference between, I can only speak of American indigenous people and Westerners, is if you broke your bow and arrow and you're like, God, I can't eat, you wouldn't go to the bow and arrow store or bow and arrows on the web, nor would you make it, because there's probably a much better bow and arrow maker than you there. You would speak to the hikora, the shapuri, and you go, Shapuri, I can't feed my family. I don't have a bow. But you're a very good bow maker, Darren. So you're walking down the path and you run into Graham, who's the best bow maker around. And you just made a brand new bow. And by happenstance, he goes, God, Darren, I really need that bow. Hey, I really need that bow. Well, Westerners say, well, that's happenstance, coincidence. But the strange thing about paradigms of culture is when you live in that culture, that kind of happenstance happens many times a day. It really exists. We are convinced to believe that our paradigm, which underneath it all really is, whoever gets the most weapons and is the most vicious wins and gets the most toys. That's our basic paradigm. They have a different, there are many paradigms in the world. Ours is not the only one. We've been convinced we are. And now the people who are saying they're becoming the new psychedelic elite, they're trying to say they're going to translate that to us. No mommy's way. That's ridiculous.
I was kind of going to ask something similar about the seeing these cultures that haven't really been contacted and the rituals and the ceremonies they do. Like, a lot of that gets sort of blamed on superstition now. Even from spiritual people, they still think a lot of it was superstitious. But in your sense, that was it working for them for the most part?
Well, in our culture, we say it's superstitious because we kicked your ass and we won, so you're an idiot. That's the basic to make it simple. I'm a superstitious person. Superstitions everywhere. But I say to you, without a question of a doubt, I've seen true medicine people, true Pai Chi, true Huichicoracas, do things that science could not explain in any way. I've seen curings. I've seen many things. And bringing it back to Darren's question is, what I did was, when I first got there, these people will kill you. They're not welcoming you in. There's a ceremony called the Mawa you have to do so they don't kill you. And you literally stand with your weapon and you gaze up in the air and you don't flinch, right? And what I learned because of that was they would never trust me unless I took their talking plants and commune with their ancestors. So until I could commune with their ancestors and learn the ceremonies, they didn't let me in. And that was it. And how I did that was, for me, the simple way, because I'm a language guy. I just like to be with the people. I like to play around with them. I like to talk. I like to play with the kids. And you can pick up the basic 50 words of any language fairly quickly. And that's what I originally did. And then when I first mimicked the rituals and kind of gave them a great joy, laughter of me doing their rituals and them going, whoa, after a while, I got very good at it. And that's why when the epidemics happened and the Venezuelan government said to me, it's impossible to do anything, it's like wrangling chickens, one of the people there said, well, this guy's lived with them a lot. He's got a whole different relation. And I went out there and in their terms and language, I explained to them in their terms that a virus is a type of hikora. And once I did it in their term, they said, we got it. They understood it completely. My joke was always, there are no stupid native people in the Amazon. If you're indigenous in the Amazon, you're dumb, you're dead. You got to be super smart every day just to survive.
So did you actually have to get like approval from the ancestors? Did they go in their ceremony then and make sure that like you were sort of, past the test from them?
No one would trust me until I did that. Couldn't do anything until I did that. Oh no, my thing that's very different is a little bit later than me, but a lot of semi-known people went down to the jungles, Mexico, South America, came back to the United States 2 weeks later and like, oh, I'm so amazing that the people thought I was the great white god. And they told me their secrets. Poor horse pucky. These people will not tell you a word of the truth for 2-3 years. They're not giving, they know, they keep their cards tight, these people. So I had to be there a very long time to get in. And being there a long time, I married into tribes. I was part of stuff. I did a lot to help them. And really how I got my presidential permission was Carlos Andrés Perez, the president of Venezuela at the time. He did a TV show when the epidemic started, and he flew over the jungle tribes in a remote, supposedly uncontacted area in a helicopter, and they were all yelling. The Yanomami were yelling, on Mikey, Napi Napasike, Bruka Chapori, Chupori. And he says, what are they yelling? And the pilot said, they're talking about Mikey. You want to meet Mikey? So it was them who cried out to the universe and said, he's the one guy we've known a long time that we trust. We don't trust any of you. And so that's what kind of put me in that position I got into. It wasn't that the government officials went, oh, he's good for us. There was so much of a cry out from the tribes and they didn't kill me. That's why I'm here today.
And what epidemic was this? This was one a few decades ago, or?
These were the epidemics of the 80s, which the ones in Brazil right now with Jair Bolsonaro, the ex-president, was a repeat of the same thing. The Brazilian government, who, now they have Lula who's fighting it, but in those eras was not backed by neo-Nazis. These were literally the sons of the boys of Brazil. These were Nazis. And they had a mass extermination because they found gold and uranium in the El Dorado, in the Alto Orinoco. So they sent thousands of gold miners in, knowing they all had diseases and all. And they came into the region. And the main diseases they had was malaria, dengue fever, acocinosis, schizomaniasis, but also hepatitis C and Delta, which is deadly C, became very prevalent because the gold miners, they were stealing 8-10-year-old little girls and prostituting them. And then when they were sick and burnt out, they just suelta them, let them loose in the jungle, and they go right back to their tribe and get everybody sick. And this is part of their plan too. So yeah, what goes on at the edge of the world is not the story we're getting told here. And the interesting part is psychedelics is very much part of that and a big subject now. And people who are pushing for what I call colonial eugenics control of psychedelics, that's not where I'm coming from. I work with the National Congress. I am authorized by the National Congress of American Indians. And I believe that a intertribal, inter-American group of female elders, grandmothers, should be in charge of all psychedelic legalization and psychedelic distribution. And it should start with them getting the first medical assistance, because I live around reservations most of my life. And at this point, and I'm not exaggerating, I'd say almost 90% of all the kids under 21 are addicted to either fentanyl or meth at this point. It's that bad. Wow. So they're the ones who should get the help first. Not people who want to get rich and buy the fanciest new Tesla, a car that destroys the environment almost worse than anything.
So do you suggest this intertribal female elder group would be in charge of this psychedelics for the whole country, or just the natives?
No, for the whole country.
Oversee the district. Because big pharma's already getting their teeth in there, in Canada at least. Anyways, big pharma's already kind of getting their teeth in there too, in Canada.
Oh, yes and no. Big pharma, it plays out this way over and over. It's no mystery. Big pharma, there's a group of people now who believe that because they've taken tons of these drugs, that makes them entitled to make all the money from them. And they call themselves the leaders in the I call them psychonauts, because I've met many of their top shamans and therapists, and I wouldn't give them a penny of value. They're just made up gobbledygook to play in that woo-woo world and be woo-woo. It don't go nowhere. Now, when you're talking about using synthetic pharmaceuticals for specifically diseases of civilization, like fear of death, cancer, PTS, LSD, all these type of things. Yes, I think there's wonderful breakthroughs. And the fact is, if everybody ran out and got these plants, they'd go extinct in a year. So that's not an answer. But what my point is, without the proper rituals done the proper way, exactly, with these correct plants, talking plants can establish communication with nature, which is exactly what they were used for. When I did ayahuasca for years, I did it, as you said, to commune with the ancestors, to figure out which way the game was moving in the wind, until I came back to the United States and heard about, oh, I'm going to become a bodhisattva, oh, I'm enlightened from it, oh, I'm doing self-help. That's all invented here. That's not at all what those people use it for. So, and the other twist that's come is those plants' languages are all in a tonal scale. And so you have to sing in their language. So I've gone to some of these very big organizations, events I've been invited, and it's a comedy routine. They're singing Kenny Loggins songs and this song their mother taught them. No, one of the ladies there said to me, she said, well, you live with the Lakota so much, you just do what the Lakota guys do. I said, no, I'm singing in Yanomami, not Lakota. The truth is, all the tribes know that tonal language. And the Lakota, the Yanomami, name them all. When they do their ceremonies, they don't do them in their language. There's another archaic language, which is much more tonal in this way. It's a tonal thing. If you're singing Winnie the Pooh doesn't know what to do, the plants aren't hearing you. You're just so happy that you've come back in one piece from being stoned that you think you're enlightened. You know what I mean? And yeah. I really hope people will start to learn and, kind of get on a better path with it that can really help the survival. I'm a great grandfather. I want the kids to live, you know, and I'm not that interested in getting a Tesla car. Where I live, it has no value at all. We don't have any of that stuff that would support that.
I'm assuming that there needs to be a proper sort of initiation or learning aspect without just people. Like it seems to me there's a bit of a danger with so many people just jumping right into it.
Well, the danger is this, and I've seen it over and over, and this is my problem. Good people, so many people already, we all have a certain amount of mental illness at different times in our life, and it becomes more acute, more aggravated in certain people. So they self-medicate because the pharmaceutical system is not working for them at all, because the pharmaceutical is created to make money, not to work for them. They try to keep people in the same sickness going on, and new medicines for that, new medicines make money. That's why I'm afraid of that system, of that stuff. But you can get down into the inner self, and even people alone can start out themselves and try these things and search themselves. But what I've seen happen over and over is on Saturday, they hold a shamini meeting, and the lead shaman, and you always know them because they have some silly outfit or a man bun or something to give them away. And they go, this is sacred because everything I do is sacred because I'm sacred. And I'm like, who told you that? Your mommy? That isn't the definition of sacred. So they do the ceremony. They come down. By Sunday, they believe they're a bodhisattva. By Monday, they're searching for enlightenment. By Tuesday, the egg's starting to crack. By Wednesday, they're questioning themselves. By Thursday and Friday, they're either manic depressant or suicidal or schizophrenic disorder or whatever they have, the situation. And then they take self-medicate the next weekend, sing blah, 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 their thing. And they go in there. I know people that have been in cycle for years. And I will say to you, they have damage from that. They are not better for it. They're hurt for it. And I think these things are so important, so sacred, so medically important on every level that I just pray that what happened with cannabis does not happen with this, where all the medical, think about it. Remember all the giant breakthroughs? I was on the program that worked with kids with grand mal seizures, and we had unbelievable miracles happen. Have you even heard about any of that in regular people for a long time? It all became commercial in pot that tastes like children's cereals, where they say doesn't have chemicals, but it has more chemicals in it than you can count, and psychedelics are more dangerous. Think of how powerful they are to the human brain. Some of these people said to me, well, we've had it worked out with our psychonauts that people don't have bad trips anymore. Is that insane? There's tons of bad trips all the time. Nobody has fixed that. They think that you could take Prozac and Valium with it and it will remove the side effects. So it's a better experience. Our scientists have figured out all you're doing is removing the last little hair tiny piece of true spirituality. All those things your body goes through in the ritual, if you do it in the real setting, you realize that's all tied into nature. You are not participating if your body is not going through that. You're supposed to be throwing up. When you throw up from two of those things, that's literally expelling that.
You're purging, right? You're purging.
It's a purging.
Yeah. Yes. Darren?
I don't know what to say that there, because I think funny but true. And I think it's extremely dangerous. And as I pointed out, that is exactly the combination that was used in Berlin to bring on the 1,000 rays of light of the next Reich. So there's a history of that being problematic. And I couldn't agree with you more. We've come to a time, it's an interesting thing. A friend of mine here said to me, he said, it's kind of the left went so left, they become right. And the right's gone so right, it's now talking left agendas. And I don't know where, I was never part of any of that. I'm not a political guy that way. So, I'm like, wow, but I couldn't agree with you more. We're in a very tricky time now, and people are selling agendas for specific reasons. And the media is so powerful that people don't even question them. I'll give you the funniest example, and it's so mundane, but it shows the thing. There was a guy named Cristobal Colon, and they changed his name to Christopher Columbus. And he came to the Americas and he met the native people, and he thought he was in India. We all learned this in school, and he called them Indians. Well, guess what? In 1492, there wasn't a country named India. It was called Hindustan, and the people were Hindustanis. And this whole Indian thing was made up because a certain ethnic group wanted to use that as a control mechanism. The actual truth was when the Padres first came to the Americas and they realized in Europe it was filth and disease and pandemics and people living in excrement, just a horror movie, really. They got here and everybody was robust and healthy. So the term they used was indios, in the image of Dios, in Spanish, God. That was the name. Indians had nothing to do with it. There is no guy Christopher Columbus. And I think 99% of the people in the United States believe that is a true story because academia has played its hand in making this very mythology that Don was talking about seem like it's true and real. And as I agree with him, there are certain lines, change is great, but change just for the change of sake of change, that's what happened, what he's talking about. A lot of these people might have started smoking pot. They went to LSD. They went right to coke. They went right to heroin. They went right to whatever drug of the month club was for the last 50 years. And now it's cool. I know many people in South America, very wealthy kids, sons of presidents, who used to be big club kids who sold MDA and ecstasy in nightclubs, and now they all claim to be shamans. There's a great confusion, and I think Darren pointed out very well, slightly tongue-in-cheek, but very well. It's very dangerous, and it could be very harmful to children. And this is an issue with me being a great grandpa. I'm curious about children health and children being good and children having a future.
Yeah, I agree. Good point. Darren, do you have anything to add to that? Well, it's coming through for me.
Me too.
Yeah, I can see it on the thing.
Ain't going. Well, that was Aldous, Francis was the nephew who ate the mescaline with him in the book. He's the guy, Francis. And Francis told me outright, they were all a bunch of fascist eugenicists. Francis started Survival International as a way to fight against his uncle and his father. And once again, the point that Darren made, I too am a believer in freedom very deeply. I'm all about being free and feral. I'm very much into that. And I very much believe that none of these things should be illegal in that way. And people should not go to prison and suffer for working on their mind and all that way. And I very much believe in the freedom. Let's face it, even if I didn't, it's been proving all these controls make the problem worse with illegal and don't make it better. So forget that. I believe in the freedom, but with freedom too, there's responsibility. And that's partly. I couldn't agree with. I. Yep. That's nicely put too. I feel the same way, and I think that the techno feudalism. The funny point to me is there's only three things really in the environmental thing that people herald as successful: wind turbines, these silly electric cars, and solar panels, which I have. I'm off the grid more or less. I use it. But the truth is, we're pushing in the only future for these devices is lithium batteries now. And I've been to lithium mines and cobalt mines. It's more destructive than fracking. So in the end, it's these people giving us these phony environmental raps on the web that may be our very destruction. That's how confused, and it's confused, and it always comes to the big problem with confusion. Is it a conspiracy or is it just fuck up and cover up?
Exactly. Is it intentional or is it incompetence? I mean, it's
And it's probably a mixture of the both,
Yeah.
you know. And there's one underlying element that drives it, which actually fear can be a very positive thing. Fear isn't only negative, but let's be realistic. From politicians afraid, I would say what I believe, but if I do, I'm going to lose my job and I'm going to lose my $1 million bonus. So I don't want to do that. Down to normal people who are very afraid underneath it. And that's why I believe in this new system of believing everybody's trying to be this kind of Wizard of Oz. Just think lovely thoughts. If you work on yourself and think lovely thoughts, everything's going to be positive energy and heal. No, that's never worked in the history of the United States or the world. And if you do that and get anywhere, they'll lock you, they'll shoot you. So that ain't it. So the bottom line is people are afraid. So in their mind, they invent these alternative ways so they can survive mentally and not short circuit. And I believe that's what we're growing a lot now. A lot of these fantasy belief systems, because the reality is so difficult and so fearful right now that without that, we couldn't function. So I feel for everyone. I'm not really passing judge. I love all people. I mean, I don't care what you are. I just find the human species very fascinating. Like people said to me in the jungle, why didn't you get into the jaguars or the anacondas? The people is what really fascinated me. They were fascinating. They're wonderful. People are great. So I see it. And I want to say that sometimes people, many years ago, when I first came out of the jungle in the late 70s, I went to the World Bank, the Inter-American Bank, World Health. I spoke at all these places. And people used to call me the Duke of Doom because I'd be like, people, I'm out at the edge of the world and it's unraveling out there. And they go, don't worry. The scientists said, don't worry, it'll be 300. It'll happen, but 300 years. Then they said 200 years. Then they said 100 years. Now, these are the same people who called everything wrong. Now they're saying it's going to happen tomorrow. Right? And these are the same guys because they get paid. You cannot be a scientist unless you cop to it because it's those big people giving you money. And unless your theories and your research doesn't back their greed, you're not going to get any funding and any grants. So it's a system, kind of a monster set up in this way. And I personally don't believe, I have no faith, as John Fire Laimbeer, the Lakota medicine man, said to me long before I was legal age, he said, no politician or the scientists they pay to make their lies sound like truth are going to help us out of the trouble the Wasiku have gotten us into. Only the ghost dance can do that, but we have lost their steps. And that kind of sent me on my way in a crazy way. And I believe that. My faith is in Mother Nature. My faith is why we are still murdering the last uncontacted tribes on earth in the Havari and up in the Siapa and the Puro Potako, where there are still people like that who still know the ancient rituals and the use of plants. We're literally murdering off the very chance we have for our survival. And what's so fascinating to me is Many of the environmental groups have gone into the more westernized villages, tried to change their culture to fit their ideology. And so when I was just in Peru, many of the Machaginga boys and all are working on the road into the Javari to get in there. And I was like, how can you do that? And they said, listen, these outside environmental Amazonian groups and all, they've come here and destroyed our religion. They've turned our women against us. We just want to make money and move somewhere else and get some other women. It's horrible. So why they go, oh, we're saving the Amazon. Let me tell you, what you've done ain't added up to a speck of shit on the monkey's ass. The Amazon is imploding into itself. You have saved nothing. That's just fairy tale woo-woo talk.
What are some of the solutions using sort of an indigenous environmentalism?
Here's the solution for me. Two things, very simple. First things, really setting up communications with the few people like me as a bridge to be able to get stuff from these people. Because these people are very afraid the world's falling apart too. Don't kid yourself. They're aware of that in their own world. You know, they've had all these diseases. They've had Sikia do all this horrible stuff to their children out in the jungle that they don't understand at all. They're aware something's going on. But the trick to the environment is so simple that's why, part of why we have the trouble. I've seen it over and over. You take a 10-year period and block off a barrier reef, block off the Amazonia section. 10 years, unless there's forever chemicals in some form in there, Mother Nature will heal herself. She is amazing at that. She could, but we're poking, no, we got to invent this. No, we got to invent that. All these inventions are $1 trillion ideas so people can get super rich making believe they're environmentalists. That's all that it's about. They have not achieved zero, negative zero. But the problem is where the environmental movement has gone is, well, we really like clones. What are the things that fly around in the air?
Drones? Satellites?
No, the little things that people send around to take pictures. What? Drones. Yeah, thank you. Drones. So they go, oh, we're using our smart enlightenment to help the Indians. We're flying over their land and demarcating. Well, I know as a fact, if you don't have a physical form to protect those perimeters, they don't mean anything to illegal miners to go. They mean nothing. They're not existent in the jungle. It's a joke. Oh, give us more money for this. We're doing wonderful things. It's crazy for a guy like me to say, but I believe the military in the whole world, all of us, all the tribes, got to get into this battle to save the earth. And the military, instead of making fake wars and killing children, all these horrible things, they should be on the front line, protecting each of these regions for 10 years, healing them up spot by spot, and we could reclaim our place on the earth again. That's simple.
Instead of blocking out the sun and cutting down trees and burying them in the ground?
Yeah, you know, all these things. Oh, we have to find the next lithium deposit. We have to find cobalt. We got to find uranium. Let it sit. We saw that with COVID. After like 6 months of COVID, all kinds of environmental systems started popping back. Even that in a little bit of time. It's very possible, but you can't be a big money person doing that. You can't invent an app that'll make you $1 trillion to do that. You got to do the hard work. And to me, that's the key to the ghost dance. Someone said to me the other day, even though I come from a different ethnic background, I'm not American Indian. And they said, well, you can't talk about the ghost dance. I said, the key to the ghost dance is bringing all tribes together. So we bring all the tribes together and go, oh, no, we can't have Irish people because they're not part of this tribe. Everybody's in. That's the beauty of the ghost dance. There is no tribe that is a white man's lie created by the Smithsonian. That the Paiute, there is no Paiute that will tell you that's enough knowledge, or Savio, that they own the ghost dance. Many different tribes ghost dance in their own unique way. They have their derivation of it. The ritual was first danced by two gods, the plumed serpent and the Lord of the Dead. to create civilization and protect us. It is purposely a ritual for all people. And here's the big mistake people make, is it's inherited in the soil, not in the blood. It's what Mark Twain talked about, that wild and free spirit of the Americas that Mark Twain said, everything good about the United States was what we stole from the Indians, right? It's inherent in the soil. It's not, well, I'm related to the King of England, so I'm better than you, Graham. It's not that. It's the people and the soil that's inherited. And the other big mistake that's been made is that there's two famous ancient dances. There's the ancestor dance, which is literally contacting ancestors. They may be your antepasados, your great-great-great-grandparents, or they may be ancestors from the region you live that have nothing to do with your bloodline, because this isn't bloodline. But the ghost dance does not dance with those spirits. It dances with the wild and free spirit, the Nagual, the totem spirit of the Americas is what you dance with. So people go to me, teach me the ghost dance. And I said, I can help you get closer to it, but I'm not Arthur Murray, and this ain't the mambo. This ain't, I'll teach you 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. You've got to get in a place to those spirits and do that. But in our culture, what's happened is people think they can do that by taking one of these entheogenic plants 20 times and going, it's all about the love in this. No, that doesn't make you a medicine person. I'm sorry. That makes you someone who does that, And so I see a hope in all this. But I will say here, I really believe on a big scale, I don't know if anyone, and I've been in the environmental movement a long time, I don't know anybody that's really doing anything that's working. All the ideas and what the government's saying, we're doing this and that, show me where it's worked. I lived in those places. This is empirical knowledge. I got it firsthand. I didn't read this in a book and read another old guy's book and then write another book about it. I was there. I've seen it. And this is what I see is going on. Well, yeah, I got all that stuff. First, I always forget, so I'm going to plug my book, The Ghost Dance, An Untold History of the Americas. And it tells a lot of the story that we were talking about today and a lot about the different tribes and the origin, the 9,000-year lineage of the ghost dance. And you can get that on Amazon easily. And I am the Ghost Dance on Instagram. And I post sometimes, but to be honest, I'm not happy with those social media platforms. So because I got a reasonable amount of followers and all, I like to talk to my friends and my peeps and all, but I'm fairly upset with the people who run those things. I think they're kind of getting in the realm of what Don said. They're diabolically silly. I don't think they're even badasses. I think they're a bunch of lame, nasty Revenge of the Nerd kind of guys. That's why I go for fuck them and cover. I've met a lot of big, powerful, this is I'm not going to mention names, but we know who, and I've met them. They're the smartest person in the room. Not to me, they're not. They're kind of like rats who are good at stealing and manipulating the financial system and got lawyers that know how to cheat every angle. I don't consider that intelligence. I consider that strong personal survival techniques like a rat has. So I ain't impressed. I've met a lot of those people, and I'm impressed by Jane Goodall. I'm very impressed by her. We're both come out of the Explorers Club, and old Jane's the real thing, and you don't see her out here talking this stupid stuff because she's real, and she really did something. And so, yeah, I'm on there and I'm on a lecture tour. At the end of October, I'll be in New York City. And for me, I've been actually the last 3 years, I've been almost exclusively in Latin America. And I just got back. So I've done like my first two things here. And we will be posting my tours. And I'm at Michael Stuart Ani on the web. And my foundation, my old foundation is the Amazonia Foundation, which is a very famous foundation. And my new foundation is talkingplants.org.
Talkingplants.org. Yeah. One quick question about Jane Goodall. What do you think about her views on like depopulating and thinking that there should only be like 500 million people on the earth?
Well, like I love Jane Goodall, but like everyone, I don't agree with her on everything. I come from a marginal ethnic background myself, so I have a different look than her. She comes from Anglo America. For me, what I see is if you look at the destruction on the earth, all those brown and black people who is all getting blamed and we got to teach them Planned Parenthood and all this stuff, believe it or not, they do probably 1% of the damage to the earth, even in their masses. 98% is done by 1% of the elite population.
There you go.
So the story that, oh, we got to get rid of all those brownies, to make this work is another bull story. It's not what's going on. And another thing to that is, before the missionary system, there was never overpopulation in that way, because in traditional Mesoamerican and all Pan American tribes, the uncle is the father of the child, because the uncle grew up with the mother, it's her brother, and they're in the same village. And I may be the father, but I live in another village, and your uncle killed my father, and I got vendetta with you. So when you have the guy there like that, greater care. They've watched the kids grow up. There's such a bond there.
There's been male influence no matter what, in a way, right?
Exactly. The evangelists, especially missionaries, and there's a big tumult going on now in Uganda, finding out they've been lying through their teeth and killing indigenous Native people. They're like crazy. It just came out yesterday. It broke. They go around. I've seen them firsthand. And what they do is they change the system, kind of like what the environmental movement does now. They change the system. So at the missions, women can cook, clean, they have jobs. The guys got nothing to do. So they either start taking so many of these entheogens that it becomes a drug. Like people say to me, oh, when you were with the remote tribes, the medicine man must have taken stuff all the time, every day. Not so. I found the people out there only at specific times and for specific sicknesses do they do it. The closer they get to the mission, the more and more they do it, trying to reclaim what they're feeling they're missing. And I'll be clear about that. I like missionaries, especially with a little chopped onion and tomatoes. That's the way I like my missionaries.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. This has been fun.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I hope you do invite me back soon. Ninaskata Chili, because the gods give to those who give to the gods.
Awesome. Thank you. Oh, yeah, that was great. Yeah, it was interesting. Oh, yeah, we'll see. Hopefully we have your audio in there somewhere. Hopefully.